Hi everybody, I'm super excited to show you how I made this workbench with a built-in table saw and a flip top for my thicknesser. In this video we'll be going over building the workbench and installing the table saw and thicknesser. There'll be 2 more videos coming in the next couple of weeks for storage and finish. Anyway, enough intro, let's get building. Something I didn't say in the intro is that I'm trying to use as much scrap wood as possible. I had a piece of plywood laying around that I'm using as the base. I wanted the base to be one solid sheet as opposed to a glued up panel, as it will be more sturdy. I wasn't worried about the look of the base, so I screwed down a straight edge so I can use my circular saw to cut the panel to final size. For the rest of the workbench, I'll be mainly using all treated pine board that I scrapped from old bookshelves. Using my miter saw, I cut all of the uprights to the same length. This is important as it is very difficult to make them all the same once assembled. On my base, I marked out and pre-drilled for all of the uprights. Now was the exciting part. Using one of the panels as a spacer, I can stand up the uprights from this part here on their side and attach them from the bottom of the base piece with glue and screws. The spacer is necessary here so that once assembled, the drawer fronts will sit flush with the base. For this one panel, I need to fill the gap between the 2 panels with a thinner piece to enclose the end of the workbench. I use the base of the table saw box as a spacer to install the next uprights. Both this upright and the next one won't be filled in between of the 2 boards, just because I didn't see this necessary. But if I was using panel material, I would just make this one panel. Something to note is the back panel is also spaced in on the base so that the rear panel is flush with the edge of the base. Using 4 scraps, I cut them to the height of the bottom of the table saw box, and using some clamps, I can use them to hold up the base in place. This base is also cut out of leftover plywood to add sturdiness. I mark out the placement of this panel and pre-drill all of my screws. I should add I am countersinking all screws to ensure there won't be any interference in the future. I installed the next upright the same way and moved on to the other side panel. This panel is a lot shorter as it will be open to accept my thicknesser on top. This panel also will get a piece in the middle to close it in. I installed the top of this box the same way I installed the base of the table saw box and moved on to the back panel. For the back panel up to the thicknesser area, I'm using the back panel I removed from the bookshelves. This is thinner material, about 12mm thick, with tongue and grooves to lock it all together. For the thicknesser area, I'll be using thicker boards I have used everywhere else, and this is because it needs to hold the weight of the thicknesser, and I didn't think the other back panel material would be strong enough. The boards are glued and screwed from the bottom and to the box base panel. I then installed a front panel to this area to make an open box. Next, I close in the table saw box with another panel. I then hopped into my TARDIS and travelled forward in time to the drawers installed and the bench painted. This will all be covered in future videos. I installed some casters and sat the bench on the floor for the first time. I'll keep you from the terror of watching me cut up my old workbench. Now what am I doing here? Oh yes, using my circular saw, I cut out 2 panels that will hold the bar for the flip top. I mark out both panels at the same time to ensure that the holes will line up. This is very important. And using a Forstner bit the same size as the pipe I'll be using, I can drill them out. I'll be using this pipe for the mechanism of the flip top, and I measure and cut it a little shorter than the opening. Yes, I know, I need to add a guard to my grinder. I slide the pipe through the 2 panels and screw the panels in place. I don't glue this in as I want them to be removable. Apparently I didn't film cutting the top to size, but here it is. It's pretty general, straight edges, circular saw, you know how it goes. I marked out the opening for the flip top and cut it out with my circular saw and Japanese pull saw. I cut this inside the line, leaving an overhang to be cleaned up later with my router. I'm using MDF for the top of the bench as it is flat and cheap to replace if I need to. I'll be screwing it into the top of the uprights to install the top, and I want all of the screws to be symmetrical, so I measure out and pre-drill all of them. To pre-drill, I'm using this guide with my pocket hole drill bit. A pocket hole drill bit is perfect for this as it has the point at the end for the screw and will leave a 10mm opening so that I can fill it with dowels later. I can then lay the top in place, pre-drill into the uprights and screw the top in place. I only added a few screws for now to hold the top in place as I will need to remove it a few times before the final fitment. I can now use my router with a flush cut trim bit to clean up around the flip top opening. I measure and cut my pieces for the flip top, which includes 2 pieces of plywood that fit on either side of the pipe. I then broke for lunch, and on the menu today is an MDF and plywood sandwich. Did I really just say that? The sun is coming up again. Looking like it's gonna be a problem. I first glue one of the plywood panels in place, and then using the pipe I lay it across and attach the other plywood panel on the other side. I use glue and screws to attach everything together in the sandwich. The pipe was a little stubborn, so I used a rubber mallet to help insert it into my sandwich, and then reinstall the pipe into the panels and the panels to the workbench. Now was an exciting part, installing the thicknesser. I placed the thicknesser on top of the flip top and I screwed it in place with some hefty screws. Oh, and you know I have to show you that it works. I got some of these toggle latches to hold the top secure when not in use. Before you install the catch, you want to turn out the latch bar as far as you can and close the latch. This will ensure that you can turn the bar to add more pressure. Alright, now it's time to install the table saw into my workbench. Now, this table saw is, to be honest, pretty cheap, but really I just want the motor and the lifting mechanism, and I'll be using the power box as well. But essentially I'm going to take the top off this, the bottom off, and just have the motor and all of the mechanical pieces. And I'm going to be mounting it to the bottom of the MDF top. And then I can go through the process of installing a blade plate and all that sort of stuff. So let's start by pulling the saw apart, and I'm going to mark it out on top of the workbench. Drill the holes through the top of the workbench, that way I know that they're square on top, and then I can go around and mount underneath. Now this saw is actually attached to the top with bolts underneath, but I'm going to be having bolts going all the way through the MDF just because I don't think that screws or bolts would be strong enough in the MDF with the vibration of the saw, so I'd rather have some bolts that go all the way through, and I'll countersink those as well so that they don't interfere when passing wood across. I measure out and pre-drill for bolts to attach the motor assembly, assuring square with the front of the bench. Well, I suppose technically this is the side of the bench, but the front of the table saw. You know what I mean. I put the bolts in and then flipped over the bench top and installed the motor assembly. I'm not going to show you, but I very scuffily turned on the saw with the top upside down and lowered the blade through the top, so that I had a slot to work with for the next few steps. I measured out from the slot the blade left, and using a straight edge bit in my router, I set up a straight edge and routed the sled guides across the whole bench. My bit wasn't wide enough for this, so I had to do this in 2 passes, moving over the straight edge before the second pass. I then repeated this on the other side of the blade. For some reason, I thought this was a good time to sand the top of the bench. I don't know why. I don't know why I think of these things. Leave me alone. Using my block plane, I added chamfers to all sharp edges, and this was more to eliminate damage to the bench top. I then installed the top of the flip top. I want to keep symmetry, so I added more screws than needed. Say that 10 times fast. The top of the flip top. I measured and cut out a new bar for the lift mechanism out of steel, and I used a file to flatten one spot to match the old bar so that it will slide into the cog. Using the rubber seal from the button switch, I can mark out and cut out the hole for this using my multi-tool. I can then push the button switch into the hole and using the cover pre-drill for bolts. All of the power for the bench will be in the top drawer, so I use a Forstner bit and a saw to cut an opening for the cord to go into. I also did this on the other side of the drawer for the thicknesser. I then installed the electrics and the top of the bench. Oh, I should add that I drilled a hole that lines up with the lift mechanism. Oh yeah, would you just look at that thing rise?
That's what she said!
I now start on the saw fence. I cut some right angle aluminum to length and drilled holes to accept the pipe that will make up the fence rail. This is the same pipe I used for the flip top. I also drilled holes to run bolts into the pipe to secure it in place. Using a level, I install the 2 brackets to the workbench. Now I'll quickly add that I didn't make the 2 brackets level. I actually put the level on the workbench first and then matched that with the 2 brackets. Because if I make it level and the top of the workbench isn't level, then it's not going to be level with the top of the workbench, is it? I can then slide the pipe in and drill for the bolts, and then install the bolts. Alright, now I'm up to making the actual fence. Now I'll quickly add here that this is a concept. I just wanted to make sure that this is going to work, and I'm going to be making it better and with different material in the future. My plan is to use a metal square pipe in replace of the actual fence, and I'm not sure what I'm going to make the actual lock out of yet, but I'm going to start off with wood and work my way up from there. So to make the fence lock, I attach 2 pieces of 2x4 to a heavy duty hinge and then install a toggle latch to the other side. I needed to add a second 2x4 here to one side of the latch, as the latch was too big and wouldn't fit screwing into one 2x4. With the fence lock locked closed, I could use my drill and a Forstner bit to drill all the way through the side of the block. Essentially what I've made now is a clamp that clamps over a pipe. Now for the actual fence. I cut strips of MDF all the same width and glued and screwed them together to make a big block. Now using a straight edge against the saw blade, I can screw the fence to the locking block. I think you can see here what I'm going for. So essentially the MDF block that I've made will be replaced with a metal pole of some type, a square pole or something along those lines, and I guess I'll replace the 2x4 for the locking block out of something, maybe a block of aluminum, I'm not sure yet. Now using the fence and some straight edges, I can make up a routering jig to route out for the blade plate. You can see that the fence works. I'm just not happy with how sturdy it is, and that is why I want to upgrade it to another material. But it works for now. Now using a straight cut bit, I set the depth to the plate I'm going to use. Now I'm going to be using 6mm MDF because it's easy for me to just buy a sheet of 6mm MDF and make a new plate if I need to, and I don't have to run anything through the thicknesser to get it to the right thickness. This is where my camera decided to die, and I didn't get footage of cutting this out, but after routing the groove, I can cut out a hole on the groove closest to the blade, cut all the way through, leaving the routed channel in place to act as a shelf for the blade plate. Hopefully that makes sense. Using my fence to hold down the plate, I can raise the blade through. The plate is then secured using a screw at each end. Hi everyone, thank you for checking out my video. Hopefully you enjoyed watching me make this workbench, and hopefully you like the workbench. As promised earlier in the video, here is version 2.0 of the Tablesaw fence. It's a lot sturdier. There's a metal bar down the middle, and it is a lot stronger than what I had before. It's also a lot longer as well. I'll actually have a build video for this in a few weeks. Now, if you did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like rating down below. Leave me a comment and let me know what you think of the workbench. Now, as I said, this is part 1 of 3. In part 2, we're going to be going over making the drawers with wooden drawer runners and this thing here. Let me know down below what you think that might be. And in part 3, we're going to be going over all the finish and the trim, storage, and all the electrical work, because the entire top drawer of this workbench is where all the electrics are, including battery chargers and all that sort of stuff. If you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below and hit that notification bell so you don't miss on part 2 and 3 and all of my future videos. I also have links down below for my social media and a link to my podcast. We have lots of fun there, weekly episodes. I think you'll enjoy it, and I'll see you next time.